Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Lincoln DeMello and this is a webinar from Brennan IT on the topic of evolving your IT network and your infrastructure in a hybrid world. So without further ado, let's get started on the topic. A high-level overview of the agenda today, an introduction to Brennan IT and just overview of the market as we see it in the context of hybrid networking and SD-WAN. I'll talk about the evolution of hybrid cloud or evolution to hybrid cloud from traditional infrastructure, and then the evolution to the hybrid networking world as well. We'll get then into the details of application-aware secure hybrid SD-WAN and then talk about some practical migration steps to move from a traditional WAN through to a software-defined WAN. Let's start with Brennan IT and who we are. In case you're not aware of us, we're one of Australia's largest and leading managed service providers, voted #1 for the last 10 consecutive years by MSP Mentor. Our capabilities are quite broad, ranging from traditional IT and user support, device support, cybersecurity, and then also telecommunications, infrastructure management, and data networking. So a market overview before we get stuck into it of software-defined WAN or hybrid WAN as it sits. Today we see, according to Frost & Sullivan last year, report that 51% of Australian enterprises plan to deploy software-defined WAN or SD-WAN in the next 12 to 24 months, which is a significant number. And we're in the middle of that right now. Software-defined WAN adoption, according to IDC this year, the adoption is predicted to reach around $8 billion in spend by 2021. Again, quite a sizable number. And according to Statista, in 2019, public cloud IT infrastructure spending is expected to account for about 35.5% of total IT infrastructure spend, which is quite important for the network to consider. Software-defined WAN or WAN concerns in general, according to Gartner in 2018, the largest concern that remained in CIOs and IT managers' mind is security, followed by performance and then cost. So that just gives you some context in the sense that SD-WAN is highly topical, and we expect organizations, according to the analysts and their surveys, that it's going to be a very topical subject and there'll be some interest and spend in this area. We just talk in general about evolution. The whole theme of this webinar is about evolution, and you're probably familiar with that image in the background you've seen in other places, about the evolution of mankind to be from the early ape stage to a person working on their laptop. And the theme really, and the quote from Charles Darwin there, is about adapting to change and surviving through to adaptation. And that's what we're talking about here, is adapting the network to evolve with the change that we've already seen in the infrastructure or cloud world. So what does that really mean? So going back to phase one, a few years back, most corporate organizations' infrastructure was here on-premise at headquarters, and some of the organizations still are structured in this manner. And the sites that they operated at were connected together through a traditional MPLS network, a wide area network, which had some centralized firewall and breakout to the internet, as we depict over here. Now, that could have also been a headquarters site, and the internet could have also just broken out from the headquarters site through on the on-premise firewalls. So that was the traditional lay of the land before any real cloud adoption came around. So phase two in the evolution, let's introduce cloud services. First point to note is I've taken away one of the little icons here in on-premise data center. There's some workloads moved off-premise into private cloud, such as the Brennan IT private cloud. Some workloads move to the public cloud, such as Azure, AWS, and other workloads move to SaaS products, such as Office 365 or just Exchange Online, Dynamics and Google and the likes. So the thing to note here is the infrastructure went into a hybrid mode, being a combination of on-premise, public cloud, and private cloud. But the network largely remained unchanged because it still worked, and it's not that it stopped working. So phase 3 in what we're going through right now in the evolution of the network is to introduce the idea of a hybrid network, where the network doesn't just go in centrally and then break out, go into a hub and then break out centrally in one point, but it's a combination of direct MPLS connectivity for point-to-point traffic and internal sensitive traffic, but then also direct internet connectivity from the branch directly through the relevant SaaS products that are consumed by the organization or public cloud workloads hosted in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, IBM, and et cetera, et cetera. So notice here as well, I've taken another icon off from the on-premise data center, but one still remains. Most of you know, I'd say, and probably agree that most organizations are not 100% in the cloud yet, nor are we suggesting they should be. So some infrastructure still remains on-premise, and now the network needs to evolve to cater for this scenario, and that's where we enter the concept of software-defined wide area networking. As per my diagram before, you'd see that software-defined networking or hybrid networking is the key message. SD-WAN or software-defined WAN is not just about a wide area network over the internet via tunnels. It's about positioning the combination of MPLS connectivity for traffic that's destined to stay within the garden walls of the organization, and then also introducing local secure business internet at the branch for local internet breakout and application awareness to dynamically steer traffic across the connections according to performance-based routing measures to optimize the end user experience. So all that put together really equates to hybrid secure SD-WAN. And by doing so, it gives you an outcome that is reliable, it's flexible, it's easy to deploy, particularly in new branches, taking advantage of carriage that's already there, rather than waiting for new carriage to be procured, which will come later on, and allows you to scale rather rapidly rather than wait on any one connection to be upgraded in isolation. So that's the high-level overview. I hope I've made the point around the evolution and the need to evolve the network to match the reality of the hybrid cloud. So let's get stuck into what we mean by application-aware hybrid SD-WAN, the Brennan IT story around SD-WAN and our solution. So let's start with the traditional versus SD-WAN. In a traditional site, and most of you would have this arrangement today, you would have a site, maybe it's your head office, and you would have a combination of two carriages, maybe you have only one. You'd have, for argument's sake, a 50 megabit per second primary MPLS connection and a 10 megabit per second failover MPLS connection. In an SD-WAN world, that changes slightly. You still have multiple carriage elements, but the way they're used changes. So in that branch example, we may only now need 10 megabit per second MPLS connectivity for real-time critical traffic, and I'll get into that in the next slide. We may have a 50 megabit local internet breakout for some other critical traffic, a business-grade internet connection, not a residential grade. And we also may have some mobile broadband, 4G with a very generous data allowance, and then also 5G coming along for even higher speeds and that lower latency in the future for some non-critical background traffic that we may require from the site. So the real intelligence now is at the edge, and then so is the responsibility for the security, more so than ever, since you're introducing a local internet breakout at the branch, whereas traditionally where it would be centrally controlled through a central firewall. So it's important to consider that. So let's dive into what this application awareness is all about. So before I just do that, I just cover off that. For those that you think that SD-WAN is just a matter of deploying branch devices that would then just mesh together and work as one large WAN and you can move to that model. Sadly, that's not really the case. These branches still need to hub beyond 3 or 4 endpoints. So it still need to hub somewhere. So you'd still need to have a core network of some sort for the SD-WAN branch tunnels to terminate on. They wouldn't create a full mesh topology. It would just be overly cumbersome for the edge device. All right, moving on to application-aware traffic routing. So I mentioned before just a little snippet about 3 classes or grouping traffic together. Application awareness in SD-WAN, the responsibility is centrally orchestrated, but the control is given to the edge device. Essentially, the router is replaced with a more intelligent SD-WAN router firewall combination box, and it does these things. On the fly, it's inspecting packets and it's categorizing them into 3 areas. Business critical real time. Some examples of these applications are here. Voice over IP, whatever application you use for that. Some maybe SAP modules, Skype for Business, Citrix, Oracle, other hosted PBX UC products, video conferencing, would be typically tagged and put into this class of service here. Business critical, some examples there, maybe Office 365, SharePoint traffic, file access, intranet, email, etc. And then non-critical, social media browsing, background operating system, Windows updates or iOS updates for your iPhone or Android updates for your mobile devices. That would fall into those categories. So as traffic is leaving and coming into the branch, it gets inspected and treated as such and then routed as such. So let me then move over through to the next part of it. The non-critical traffic would be mapped to a carriage service that's connected to the branch. Let's, for argument's sake, say that this is a residential NBN connection, an internet connection that would just go through that. It doesn't need to go through to the MPLS core, doesn't need to waste the resources there, so it would just break out through that. This traffic here, which is business critical, may just go through what we call a standard MPLS connection. For example, a fixed wireless microwave link that you have at the branch site. And then the premium traffic is the business critical real-time traffic that would be mapped to a carriage element that's plugged into the back of the SD-WAN box, which may be a business grade fiber connection, 100 meg connection, NBN business, what have you. So I hope I make my point here is that the SD-WAN, hybrid SD-WAN is about real-time application aware routing of traffic across these various combinations of connectivity. And that really gives you the best outcome. All right. So for us to put this type of solution together, we haven't invented it from the ground up. Our solution is primarily based on Fortinet, which is a security pedigree hardware vendor out of the United States, who are now moving into the SD-WAN space and doing a very great job of that. And that's our default proposition for any new customers to come on board, that they would onboard on our Fortinet-based SD-WAN platform. However, we also have Cisco Meraki in our portfolio and customers that are already quite familiar and wedded to the Cisco Meraki dashboard for wireless, for firewall, etc. We can also build the SD-WAN product on that platform as well. So everything I've said before this holds true for either of those vendors quite equally, except that we would still see Fortinet as our default and also a stronger player in the security space as well. And I said before, security is a key consideration in SD-WAN since now the door is being opened up to the internet at the branch level, not just centrally controlled through one firewall. So it's important for the SD-WAN device to also be a very capable next generation firewall, which it is in the case of both those vendors, but I'd say more so with Fortinet. And our carriage partners, NBN, Telstra, Optus, TPG Vocus, and a few others for international connectivity, and all that put together is really the underlying hardware partner ecosystem that forms our product. So in a page, in a few points, what is our secure hybrid SD-WAN proposition? To summarize, it's a combination of MPLS and local internet access. So I've covered that off enough, the importance of having both in the mix, not just internet. The carriage is supplied ideally by Brennan IT. So you buy your MPLS connectivity from us, and that needs to be the case. But you should also be buying your internet access from us as well. However, in the interest of flexibility, we would allow an element of BYO internet as well into your network. So for argument's sake, if you acquired another small business and they're already in contract with one of our competitors for internet access to those sites, we could drop in an SD-WAN box there and charge some fee just for the management of the SD-WAN element, but then let you BYO that carriage until such a point in time that the carriage can be switched over through to us, and an MPLS connection also put in place to do the performance-based routing as I've described earlier. We also include a fully managed FortiGate endpoint device that performs that SD-WAN and security function at the branch edge. That's if the carriage is purchased from us, we include that as a CPE or a terminating gateway on that carriage. And if you're BYO carriage into the branch, then that device would just be purchased and put on under a monthly recurring managed service fee. So we've got flexibility to address both scenarios and anything in between. We have geo-redundant hub sites for those SD-WAN branch sites to terminate in, so give you resiliency. Again, that's not something just an enterprise could do themselves easily. That would be a significant level of investment in that. We also give you the FortiGate Cloud SD-WAN dashboard visibility for free in the Fortinet version of the deployment, and of course in the Cisco Meraki version of the deployment, the dashboard is quite front and center of anything Cisco Meraki, so that visibility is there nonetheless. So pointing again, a free deep visibility dashboard, application awareness, security, breaches, all that data is in there. Give you a sniff of that a bit later on. And we also, as part of an onboarding service, have a default set of application fingerprints and category templates. So when I go back to a few slides, and I've talked about identifying those applications and putting them in the various buckets of background, critical, and then critical real time, we don't need to start from scratch every single time. We generally have a library of 300 to 400 applications, and generally how business would want to be treating those, and we just apply the default application fingerprint. So we don't have to start from scratch, and you don't need to provide us with a ton of information. Of course, we would need to know what applications you do consume so that we could cater for that in any customization. And that's our proposition overall. Now, migration steps. We have a dedicated website for that. The webinar recording will be available after this. I encourage you to read more on it. The first step from migrating from a traditional WAN, which I think most organizations have today, unless they're ahead of the curve, need not be an old big bang approach. First place to start, though, is to assess the need to improve your network experience and limit the spend increase in the process of upgrading that or increasing that bandwidth capacity that's available to your branches. Ultimately, if you don't have any hybrid cloud adoption, you don't use SaaS services in combination with your own infrastructure, then SD-WAN would not really yield a large degree of benefit. The benefit comes from everything I mentioned before around the hybrid network, matching the hybrid cloud environment. So need to improve your network experience. There's going to be a need to start to do that in the first place, and you've got to have the need to also do that in a very cost-effective manner. I'll take it as a given that that would be a yes for everyone on the webinar today. So after you've done that, you need to map out where your applications hosted. Most of you would know what applications you use. There'd be a combination of public cloud and internally hosted apps and infrastructure in most cases. And then engage us to develop a phased design to go from a WAN to an SD-WAN. And the key point is your WAN and the SD-WAN can coexist when you take a hybrid approach like I've talked about here. If you're moving to a SD-WAN that's purely over the internet with a service provider that does not have any MPLS core routing assets, then that would be a different story. In a hybrid world, the two can coexist. So in that sense, then the best thing to do is to migrate the sites from the traditional world to a hybrid SD-WAN at a site-by-site, in a site-by-site method. So it minimizes any double bubble costs that you may be running from having two service provider contracts. You would consume the additional carriage that was ordered for that site. For example, you had already had a 50 megabit MPLS connection. We put in a business internet and a value for money business internet connection in there. Both those connections then get consumed. There's no wastage, and it gets consumed in SD-WAN at that site, and it coexists with the rest of your WAN. That brings us to the end of the webinar. We won't be taking questions live, but we encourage you, if you do have any questions, to please get back to us via the follow-up email that you get after this, and get in touch with your counterparts in Brennan IT, and we can have a discussion on how you can evolve your network from the traditional architecture to an SD-WAN architecture and improve the end user experience and total cost of ownership overall. Thanks for listening.